This is the first in a series of videos I'm creating on using Blender. So Blender is a 3D modeling tool that can be used to make 3D objects or videos, etc. And in this case I'm going to be using it to create a basic sprite that can be used in a computer game as a character or other other sprite. In this case I'm going to create a very basic shape of a missile, and really it's about showing you how to navigate around Blender and some of its basic features. So Blender is available for many different computers and operating systems. In this case I'm running it on Ubuntu Linux, but it will run on a Raspberry Pi even, as long as it's a Raspberry Pi 3. I suspect it's too slow to running it on the older versions. Even on a Raspberry Pi 3 it's a bit sluggish, so you might prefer to run it on a desktop or laptop computer if you've got one available. You can download Blender from the Blender website or use the normal software installation tools for your operating system, particularly for Linux. The one thing you'll need to use Blender is a mouse. If you've got a laptop with a trackpad, then whilst technically possible, I would strongly recommend that you plug in a proper mouse and use that, because you're going to need to use the additional buttons and preferably a track wheel. So when you start Blender up, it comes up with a splash screen. We should just get rid of that. By default it actually comes up with a very basic shape in the middle. But as you can see, there's all manner of controls all around the screen, so it's quite complicated when you first look at it. We won't be looking at all these, we'll just look at some of the basic options. Once you start to get used to it, then it starts to become more intuitive, but it is quite a steep learning curve at first, which is why I've created this video. So we're going to start just by playing around a little bit with the existing shape that's on here. As you can see, we've got a cube here, and it's got some arrows sticking around it. So first of all, I'll just zoom in a little bit on that. So I'm just using the track wheel on my mouse, and you can see there's a blue arrow here which represents the Z axis. There's a red arrow which represents the X axis, and a green arrow which represents the Y axis. And if we want to move the object that's currently selected, you can see that this object is selected by the orange border around it. Then you just left click and drag on one of those arrows. Move the green, the blue and the red. And that's the basic movement. The other manipulators that we can use, so they're under this widget here, 3D manipulator widget it's called, and the one that's selected by default is the arrow, which is to move the object. The second one, which is an arc, is to be able to rotate the object. Again, because we're talking about 3D objects, we've got 3 different axes that we can rotate on, and you just grab the appropriate colour and move your mouse, and that drags that around. And then the third one, which has got a cube at the end of the line, allows you to stretch the object in that direction. So as you can see, increase the size. What you're doing now is dragging only one side at a time, and if you want to keep the aspect ratio of the sides, so in this case keep it as a cube rather than turn it into a cuboid, then it's easier to achieve that by using the scale tool. First we'll just undo these changes we've made. If you're used to keyboard shortcuts, Control Z still works, but if you're used to using the edit and undo option that most applications use, you'll find it doesn't actually exist on the top. It's actually on the object menu, which unusually is at the bottom of the screen instead of on the top. An object and undo there. So, and that's one of the quirky things about this. You have to look around the screen a bit more for what you need. So the tool we want to use is in the Tools tab, which is on the left. It's selected by default, and we're going to use the Scale transformation. And as you can see, as I move my mouse backwards and forwards, I can scale the size of the cube, and it maintains the aspect ratio. Okay, so now we're going to have a look about how we can move around. So as I mentioned before, if you use the track wheel on your mouse, you can move in and out and zoom in and out. And as you can see, as well as this, we've got a couple of other black shapes here. This one here is the camera, we'll see that in a bit, and this one here is a light source. But at the moment, I'll just, as you can see, if you right click them, they become selected in exactly the same way as the shape, and you can manipulate them using the same tools as the shape. But for the moment we'll concentrate on the cube. So you can zoom in and out using the track wheel, and to rotate around you also use the track wheel, but just pressing it down instead of wheeling it. Or if you've got 3-button mouse, this is the center button that would do this, and you can change the view, the angle you're going to look at the shape, which is going to become quite important in a little bit. So that's the basic tools for navigating around. Now we're going to start actually creating the sprite, and we're going to create a missile basic shape of a cylinder with a cone on top. We don't need this cube, so we'll delete that. So first make sure it's selected with the orange border around, and under the tools you can choose delete, and when you click delete you do have to click again to confirm that you want to delete it. You could also use the delete key on the keyboard if you preferred. Now we're going to create a basic shape. We're going to put a cylinder, and that's on the left hand side in the create tab. As you'll see, there's a number of basic 3D shapes as well as a monkey. Is a little bit of a novel thing, but in this case we're just going to use the cylinder. As you can see, the cylinder has appeared in the center of the screen because that is where we had selected before. Just want to make this a little bit taller, so we're already on the stretch tool, so there we go. So that's just stretched it to make it a taller cylinder, and now we need a cone to go on top. If we press cone now, the cone will appear where the cursor is, right in the middle of our existing shape. Instead, we can click using the left mouse button this time whereabouts we want it to appear. And you see that the previous object is still selected. If I try and change any of these, it's going to move the cylinder. but where this crosshairs is where my new shape will appear, my cone. Okay, so it's not appeared quite where we want it. This is one of the things about working in 3 dimensions, is that you're not necessarily going to click on the right place for all 3 dimensions. So it's basically a case of clicking on this and using the movement tools to move it so that it looks about right. Now from this angle that looks pretty close, but sometimes, in fact this one is quite close, sometimes you need to rotate the view. For instance, it's quite possible if to have positioned it so that it looks like it's in the right place, but actually on one axis it's completely out. So just have a move around, take a different look, so you've got it just how you want it. Yeah, that looks about right. At this point it's a good idea to save your file, just as with any other application. It's a good idea to save often. Save as, and I'm just going to call it rocket or missile or whatever you want to call it, and just click save Blender file. So the next thing we'll do is look at how the object would be rendered if you wanted to convert this into a 2D object, which is what we're going to do with this sprite. And this is where that camera comes in. So I'll just zoom out in a moment. Remember, there's a camera, there's a light source, and there's our object. So to render it, then the easiest way is just to press the F12 key. As you can see, can't quite see the whole of the missile. The top has been clipped off, so we can close that. You can also use the render buttons on the right hand side rather than pressing F12, and then escape just to go back. So what we can do, as you remember, I said that you can manipulate the camera object in the same way as you can manipulate the shape. So we can zoom out a little bit. So we could move this camera up a little bit and back a little bit, and then render again. And not too bad, we've managed to get it all in the screen, but you might notice there is a slight bit of a twist on here. It's not quite straight. So one of the other things you can do is you can use the view menu, which is down the bottom, and you can align the view of the camera to what you're looking at. Align active camera to view, and you can see what the camera is seeing. So we're in the, it leaves you in the camera view. So you click on camera, we can go back and just move that back up again. Move that up. Nearly there. Okay, so now we've got the missile that is, or rocket, or whatever object that's visible. The only thing you'll see now is that we've got a really dark shadow down the left hand side, and this is because of the light source. So if we go back out, you'll see the light source is right over to the front right, so the light is shining on this side and the other side is out of view. So we can move the light source, right click it, and then you've got the move options the same as you have got with so if I take this, the light source is further in, you'll see that we've got plenty of light now here. Still a little bit shadow there. If you don't want the shadow, then you can always add another light source. And there under create, the same place as we found the shapes, but on the bottom you've got two different light sources here. There's more. There we go. So the rest were hidden by the scroll bar there. So there's several different light sources that you can add. The point lamp is quite good. It's been dropped where the cursor was. If I bring it over here, that one will shine a light on this side. And there you see the shadows have gone to a greater extent there. You can move these, add as many light sources as you want. But for now, the next thing I'd like to do is have a quick look at how we would colour this. So at the moment, as you see, it's a very boring grey colour. So Blender uses materials for the objects, and a material can take a colour, and this is how you would colour the object. So first we'll select the object. We're going to look at adding some colour to the cylinder, and the option we need is under this scene, and we want this little circle that's towards the right hand side. It's got different colours on it. You hover over it, like most things, if you hover over them, there's a tooltip and it says it's the material. So we're going to create a new material because there's none listed, and this allows you to choose the colour through here. So we're going to go for a nice bright white colour. For the cone, we're going to use a different colour material. We're going to go for red. So there we go. This is a lot more obvious than the white was. And one thing you can do, it's not required, but you can rename the materials as well. Let's call this red. which makes it easier in future if you decide to use the same colour for different shapes. Okay, so now we've got it looking how we want. We can check again using F12. So now you can see we've got this 3D object. And to create a 2D, then still in the render view, which we're on, we can click on image and save as image. And this will make, call it rocket again, a PNG file, which you can then load and edit using any other tool and import as your sprite in your game. So then we can just press escape, go back. Obviously we saved the image, but we haven't saved our actual Blender file, so just choose save again to save it. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an introduction into how to use Blender and how to get started. We've really only scratched the surface here. I'll show a little bit more in some future videos. But in the meanwhile, I hope you found that useful. If you did, then please click like, and if you want to see my future videos, if you click subscribe through YouTube, then you'll get notified of when they're available.